Hello. Well, I think I'll make this rather short. Um, this is an unusual novel, very short. It was originally called Slavery, and to be perfectly honest, it was written for a friend as a joke, but very shortly I dropped the name because it didn't feel right. It was a science fiction piece set in a dystopian future where everything had collapsed and a different way of living had taken place. And that was it. It was a short, sharp piece where the main protagonist won out at the end. So there's not really a lot that I can say about it. It was just a short science fiction piece. It was one of those things that just came to me and it was just written and it's kind of disappeared without trace, really, as not one of my finest pieces, but there it is. So not much more I can say about it. I don't think it's particularly worthy or memorable. I think there's been science fiction pieces written that's much, much better, but I'm including it as one of the 85. So some people may like it, some people may not. Some people may think it's misogynistic, and some people may think it may be the other word, the opposite of misogynistic, and whatever that is. I can't think what that word might be at the moment. But whatever that word is, it may be that word.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're moving past the purely theoretical. We're looking at a collection of sources describing, well, a collapsed future. We're going to step right into the, frankly, chilling reality of a world that rebuilt itself on legalized servitude.
Exactly. We're jumping into the year 2120. That's nearly a century after this catastrophic event they called the time of the Great Poisoning. It basically reshaped everything.
And our sources give us this really intimate, sometimes disturbing look at southern England, specifically a place called Wendsley Manor.
That's right. Wendsley Manor becomes the focal point. It's where this new, very disturbing social contract wasn't just theory. It was lived reality, formalized, refined, you could say.
So our mission today is to really unpack this post-utopian structure. How did legalized slavery, which apparently came about through economic necessity, how did it psychologically twist things for both the masters and the servants?
And we'll delve into the bizarre kind of theater of control set up by the Davenport family there.
Right, and ultimately trace the profound, really agonizing cost of freedom for one specific man, known only as slave. This is going to be a deep dive into, I guess, the architecture of obedience itself.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the system we're looking at, we have
Yeah.
to understand the scale of the catastrophe first. The time of the Great Poisoning,
Yeah.
it wasn't gradual, it was sudden, devastating, happened around the
Because the
2050s.
population drop was just immense.
Staggering. The sources say billions down to roughly 550 million people. Just try to imagine that. Global infrastructure gone overnight, essentially.
550 million? Scattered across a ruined planet? That's almost unimaginable. And the immediate aftermath, that must have just been chaos.
Pure chaos.
Odor.
And the stabilization,
Yeah.
agonizingly slow. The sources, they reveal that the first massive hurdle was just the dead.
The sheer number of bodies.
Exactly. It took a full decade, 10 years,
Yeah.
just to safely dispose of the deceased, manage the contamination,
Yeah.
the environmental side of
A
things.
whole decade just for that.
Yeah. And only by 2072, so another 12 years later, did they manage to establish what the sources consciously call immature stability.
Immature stability. So still shaky.
Very shaky. Think about it, 2 decades just to get some kind of precarious foundation back.
Okay, so 2072, they have this shaky stability, but a massively reduced population, huge economic problems.
Mm.
How does a society like that end up deciding that formalized servitude is the answer? It seems like such a leap.
Well, it wasn't really framed as an ideological choice, more like
Yeah.
necessity. That's how it was presented anyway. By 2092, the economic pressure was just unbearable.
Not enough people to run things.
Basically, yeah, not enough people to sustain high-tech systems, agriculture, everything. So the sources explain that the new governing bodies, they started classifying the citizens based on their perceived usefulness, utility.
Which led to these categories, inferior and superior.
Right. And while some tried to wrap it up in more benign language, talking about natural law, what it quickly turned into was formalized subjugation, plain and simple.
And it didn't start immediately with the word slavery, did it? It sort of crept in.
Exactly. It was a degradation of labor standards. It
Yeah.
started with just basic servants, but then it quickly became about monetizing desperation.
Okay.
So first came PPL. That stood for poorly paid labor.
Poorly paid labor, so still paid, though.
Right. Implied some kind of minimum wage, maybe some basic rights, but still, you were under the control of the superior class.
Right.
But even that, PPL, it proved unsustainable for the ruling class. They needed fully exploitable resources.
They needed more control.
Total control.
Mm.
So the system shifted pretty fast to something called LTE, labor to exist.
Labor to exist. Okay, that's a huge shift.
Yeah.
PPL, like you said, implies some pay, even if it's tiny. LTE sounds like your work is just buying you the right to live.
That's essentially it. It formalizes that exchange. Your physical effort just pays for your basic subsistence. It completely cuts the link between what you do and any kind of financial reward.
And once that link is gone.
The euphemisms just fell away. The sources note that by 2120, the time we're focused on, these individuals, they're just called slaves.
So let's dig into the mechanics of it, because it wasn't just capturing people like historical slavery often was. There was this specific legal mechanism, the A of S contract.
Right, the A of S acceptance of slavery. That contract is the absolute linchpin of this whole setup. It creates this legal veneer of choice.
A veneer.
So an individual could, legally speaking, sign this document, and by doing so, they allow themselves to be bought and sold, like property.
Which satisfy maybe some lingering ideals about not having overt chattel slavery. It made it seem
Right?
regulated, self-imposed.
Exactly. It looked, on paper, like a regulated system based on individual agreement, however coerced that agreement might have been in reality.
So when someone signs an A of S, what are they actually giving up? Just their labor or more?
Oh, much more. The sources are pretty clear. You gave up basically everything. The A of S essentially wiped out your civil personhood. Slaves couldn't own property, couldn't keep any wealth, couldn't enter into legally recognized marriages. Nothing.
It became an asset.
A mutable asset, yeah.
Yeah.
But the system did have this one mechanism for potential release, a sort of legal grace.
Mhm.
It was called the D of F, deliverance of freedom.
Deliverance of freedom. So the master could just decide to free you.
Unilaterally, yes, at any time. They could just grant the D of F and instantly the A of S contract was nullified.
Which gives the master absolute power, really, not just economic power, but the power to grant or revoke your basic human status.
Precisely. It's a massive tool of control, the ultimate carrot dangled just out of reach for most. But what's really fascinating, and maybe disturbing, is why people signed these things in the first place. It wasn't just the conquered or the absolutely destitute.
Right. The sources mention other reasons. It wasn't always just poverty driving it. Sometimes it was personal failure or even convenience.
Yeah, the notes list things like, well, simple laziness is mentioned. Or maybe a catastrophic fall from grace, someone who just couldn't cope with the stripped-down economy. And then practical needs due to old age or disability.
So a choice, but a heavily constrained choice.
Very constrained. This is the key insight, I think. This system wasn't built purely on, say, military conquest or ethnic lines like some historical slavery. It was built on the practical failure of independence in a really harsh, collapsed world. For some, the guarantee of food, shelter, maybe basic medical care. That was actually preferable to the brutal struggle of staying free.
It suggests a kind of profound social exhaustion, just giving up on the fight for independence.
And the sources do mention that apparently many slave owners were relatively benevolent, offered stable lives, even if strictly controlled. That brings us to Wendsley Manor, because that place was clearly an exception.
Right, a major exception.
Wendsley Manor is where we see the system at its most theatrical. and it's most cruel. It really shows how absolute power, even when it's sort of legally sanctioned, can just degenerate into this incredibly sophisticated psychological torture, often enabled by the very constraints the slaves themselves agreed to.
Okay, so let's picture Wendsley Manor. The sources describe it as imposing 18th century. In what used to be Devonshire, southern England, what does that setting itself tell us?
The setting is hugely important. An 18th century manor, it screams failed permanence, doesn't it? It's this massive, probably cold, drafty place that takes enormous resources just to keep running. It's a deliberate show of wealth and continuity in a world that completely fractured.
And it functioned as a farm, too.
A model farm in all but name, yeah. Producing food, resources, partly to sustain the family and the pretty extensive staff required to run such a place.
And living inside this oppressive place are the Davonport women, Holly, the mother, and then the twin sisters, Lucy and Charlotte, spinsters approaching middle age.
Right. Lucy and Charlotte are central. They're non-identical twins, but they maintain this almost obsessive physical similarity. Both have this striking flame red hair, always tied with matching red and green ribbons. They share what the sources call the pointed Davonport nose and these pale green eyes.
And apparently only the close staff could reliably tell them apart. That mirroring, it feels like a deliberate tactic, right? A way to present this unified front of authority.
Oh, absolutely. It enforces control, denies their own individuality to project this single, interchangeable image of mistress. You might never be sure which one gave the order, which just amplifies their power. And while they seem isolated in this giant manor,
They're not really cut off.
not at all. They have a secret weapon up in bedroom 7. It contains this incredibly sophisticated network based on the original pre-poisoning internet.
Wow. So they have access to knowledge, contacts.
Knowledge, contacts, even virtual reality immersion. It's a crucial detail. It shows the superior class didn't abandon technology. They just privatized it, hoarded it. While everyone else is struggling for basics, the Davonport twins are plugged in, highly connected, using advanced data systems. Systems their mother, Holly, apparently never even touched.
And Holly, she's described almost like a ghost in the house. Dozing by the fire, dementia setting in.
Yeah, she's mostly this background presence struggling with advanced dementia. Sometimes she shouts orders, but they might be completely random relics from the past. Her presence is heavy, though, because of her history.
The murder.
The murder, yes. The sources state pretty baldly that Holly murdered the twins' father 35 years before our story starts. And the fact she apparently faced no real punishment tells you a lot about that immature stability period after the poisoning. Justice was clearly selective.
And Burke, the elderly slave, he seems entirely devoted to Holly.
Burke is interesting. He's sort of separate from the main household drama. Fully clothed, unlike some others, very monotonous looking. His loyalty is absolute, focused only on Holly. And he knows the secret he dug the father's grave. It's this deep, complex bond, seemingly unrelated to her crime. Just loyalty to the person who provides the stability.
Okay, now we have to talk about the chess game. Because this image, it's central, and it's deeply disturbing. Played on the back of the man called Slave.
This ritual, it just perfectly encapsulates the calculated psychological cruelty of the twins. The man, Paul, we later learn, is described as well-built, early 40s. He's forced down on his hands and knees between them.
And his clothing.
Minimal, just short stained leather pants, thin slippers,
Yeah.
and a loose black leather collar signifying his status. Nothing else.
And the chessboard itself, it's tattooed onto his back.
Yes, a permanent mark of his humiliation. And the sources note it's fading after 14 years, scarred, rippled, a physical record of his subservience.
He's literally an object for their leisure.
Completely. He's not a person in that moment, just a surface. And the details are chilling. The sisters debating, reworking the tattoo, suggesting these garish, vibrant colors like red and blue or yellow and green, joking he'd look like a circus act. The cruelty isn't just physical, it's aesthetic. They want to make his degradation visually striking, almost attractive in its horror.
And the rules of this game are all about his control. He has to keep perfectly still, keep his breathing silent.
Absolutely silent, back perfectly straight. And the twins, particularly Lucy, touch his skin with this open disgust, wrinkling her nose at his soft old man skin, as the source puts it.
Yet they need him there.
That's the core of the sadism, isn't it? This disgust, combined with utter necessity, he's repulsive to them, yet essential for their game. It binds him into this role of almost self-loathing servitude. He's necessary, but he's disgusting.
We should also quickly mention the other staff, because there's a clear class difference. Pill and Pot, the chefs,
Right, Pill and Pod are sisters, young, early 20s, and they are waged servants, not slaves. That's a key distinction. They live off-site in Huxley, the nearby village.
And they're described as cheerful.
Unrelentingly cheerful, yeah. They seem happy with their position being chefs is a high-status skill in this world, and they definitely feel superior to the slaves. They're quoted as being relieved they don't have to deal with sweaty slaves in their kitchen.
So even among the working staff, there's this hierarchy, this looking down on the slaves as something unclean.
Exactly. It reinforces the slave's degraded status from all angles, not just from the mistresses.
Okay, let's try to understand the man himself. Slave, or Paul, as we find out later. His identity seems so wrapped up in how he entered this life. He was a runaway, wasn't he? Looking for safety, not necessarily slavery.
His origin story, as he remembers it, is quite powerful. He's 15, homeless, freezing, running away from something. He sees Charlotte outside a club in London. She's wearing pure white leather, this vision of, like, untouchable power and maybe even purity to him.
And he did something for her.
Retrieved her scarf when she dropped it. Then he waited for hours, literally hours, in the bitter cold, just hoping she'd come back out. When she finally did, she just looked at him and said, "Follow me."
And that single moment, that offer of warmth, food, shelter, that becomes the anchor for decades of abuse.
It seems so. He chose obedience over starvation, essentially. But his emotional dependency and maybe the warping of his psyche, that seems to have been really cemented about 5 years later through a very deliberate public trauma.
Right, the party incident.
Yeah. At age 20, he was forced into this awful scene. Plied with drink, ordered to have sex with another male slave, in public, in front of 100 laughing guests, the superior class.
And he resisted at first.
He faltered, yeah. And the sources say he was beaten. Beaten until he complied.
That's the moment, isn't it, where the wires get crossed, pain, humiliation, maybe sexual arousal, all tangled up together. It feels like a calculated breaking of his self-worth.
It absolutely does. A way to redirect his natural desires towards degradation. The system basically ensured that any future intimacy, any arousal, would somehow be linked back to that traumatic framework.
And this affects his private life, even the small space he tries to carve out for himself in the attic.
Definitely. His living quarters are described as cramped, often cold. He considers himself lucky not to be in the damp cellar, which tells you something. He sleeps on this lumpy old mattress.
The one Charlotte threw out.
That's the one. And the source notes it gives him a secret degree of comfort.
Which isn't about physical comfort, is it? It's because it's hers. A connection to his mistress, reinforcing that dependency.
Precisely. It's a symbol of his institutionalization. And this deep need for some kind of identity, or at least a record of his existence, drives him to keep these illegal possessions.
Illegal? What did he have?
A large mirror, significant maybe. So he could see himself as a whole person, not just a reflection in a puddle. A cabinet that doubled as a desk, and a single lamp, powered by electricity he'd illegally tapped into. Small acts of defiance, maybe crucial for just staying sane.
And the green notepad. His diary.
His diary, yeah. In a world that effectively says he has no story worth telling, he's writing his own autobiographical data. But then there's his evening ritual, which just shows the agonizing conflict inside him.
What did he do?
Every night, he pulls out this faded photo of Charlotte when she was younger. He kisses it gently, then he writes in his notepad, and just before he sleeps, he whispers, "Good night, mistress, Charlotte."
Wow. So he's preserving his own history with the diary, but simultaneously reinforcing his submission with the kiss and the whisper.
It's the absolute picture of institutionalization, isn't it? His sense of self, his worth, it's all tied up in his role as slave. We see this when Pill, the cook, asks him quite reasonably why he doesn't just try for DFF or even just run away.
And his answer?
Heartbreakingly conditioned. First he says, "Because I have nowhere else to go," which is that fear of independence the AFS system breeds. But then he rationalizes the abuse itself. He insists the mistresses wouldn't know what to do without me.
Even though Pill points out they'd just replace him in a heartbeat.
Right. But Paul can't accept that. Accepting it would invalidate his entire life, 25 years of sacrifice and suffering. His whole emotional world is built on the foundation of being slave at Wendsley Manor, however painful that foundation is.
Okay, the twins' 50th birthday party. This seems like a real focal point in the sources, where the power dynamics aren't just internal to the manor, they're put on display for others.
Absolutely. It's like the manor becomes a stage, and the cruelty becomes a form of social currency among the superior class guests.
And we see this right away with Aggie and Fell arriving, described as hard and vicious, lower status than the twins.
Yeah, financially and socially inferior. And they seem to compensate for it. They wear this aggressive brown leather, and they both carry these short, springy canes. Conspicuously,
The cane again. What does that signify in this society?
it's a potent symbol. It signals order, money, and crucially, the right to inflict pain. Even if you don't use it, just carrying it broadcasts your status, your power. Aggie and Fell clearly use their canes and their public displays of cruelty to try and elevate themselves in the eyes of the Davenports and others.
And the twins immediately use Paul, slave, to assert their own dominance over these guests, right? Starting with Lucy targeting her sister's property.
Exactly. It's a power play within a power play. Lucy orders Slave, who is technically Charlotte's property, to urinate in Charlotte's prize cactus pot.
Deliberately damaging her sister's possession, using the slave as the instrument.
Right. Lucy's showing control over Charlotte through the slave, proving his body is just a tool for their own rivalries. Paul has no choice but to obey, even though it puts him directly in Charlotte's firing line.
And how does Charlotte respond to that?
She performs her own bit of theater. Her new trick, she calls it. She makes Paul put his hands behind his back, then tosses pieces of cake onto the carpet.
For him to eat off the floor?
Yes. But it's worse. She makes him scrabble for the scraps alongside the dog, Patty.
Competing with the dog for food.
And Patty apparently gets the cake first. To complete the humiliation, Charlotte puts her foot under Paul's chin, physically preventing him from getting up easily. The message couldn't be clearer. You are below the animals, let alone us.
And the guest's departure. Aggie and Fell leaving in Landau's two-wheeled carriages.
Pulled by their slaves, young male slaves, used like beasts of burden. The sources specifically note this was seen as extreme and frowned upon even within their society, even though it was technically legal under the A of S contract.
So it was a deliberate provocation, a display of just how much they could get away with.
Absolutely. An intentionally shocking display of abusive ownership, flaunting their indifference to any kind of social decency.
Now, central to the party's atmosphere is this substance, smoky zest, an invisible gas.
Smoky zest, yeah. It's described as a hallucinogenic invisible gas. There's a mechanism hidden in a small cupboard, and Paul is ordered to turn it up full blast.
And the effect?
It rapidly permeates the rooms. It lowers inhibitions, removes social reserve, heightens sensory perception,
Yeah.
but also often leads to hallucinations, altered states. People start staggering, their pupils dilate. It basically fuels the debauchery and makes the humiliation of the staff even easier.
And even the police are involved, or at least aware. The chief inspector, Zed, is a guest.
Yes, Zed is there, and he apparently recognizes the smell immediately. This is a huge indicator of how rotten the system is.
He knows it's illegal, presumably.
He admits he's been confiscating it for 20 years. But here he is, a guest at the party, passively accepting its use, accepting the abuses happening around him. It just confirms the law exists only to protect the superiors, not to maintain any real moral order.
And the night descends into, well, the playroom, or the dungeon, as the staff call it.
Right, a purpose-built extension to the manor, dark, designed specifically for sexual servitude. The sources paint a picture of complete chaos here. Charlotte, despite Paul being her personal slave, is seen having rough sex with another slave Cowper, right there on the kitchen table, repeatedly smacking him, apparently needing that violence for arousal.
And other slaves?
Other male slaves, like someone called Slave Bug, are just dragged off silently into upper rooms. Their eyes are described as bulging, completely gone, resigned under the influence of the zest. The party basically becomes a microcosm of the whole society's corruption. Legal servitude easily sliding into systematized, drug-fueled abuse.
Okay, amidst all this darkness and cruelty, something shifts. A new slave arrives, Flory, purchased at a market, and she seems very different.
Flory is a critical turning point, really. She arrives, she's educated, and she gets promoted pretty quickly to head housekeeper. Her background is different, too, forced into slavery after her husband died of cancer 7 years earlier. Survival again.
But her personality is the key difference.
Yes. Unlike the other slaves who seem psychologically broken or resigned, Flory is described as quiet but assertive, kind, neat, and crucially, she takes responsibility for her actions. She hasn't internalized the slave identity in the same way. Paul is immediately drawn to her, feels protective.
She represents something unbroken, entering this broken system.
Exactly. She sees her situation, it seems, as temporary, a circumstance, not her defining identity. Her very presence challenges Paul's deeply ingrained belief that intimacy has to be tangled up with pain and humiliation.
And a friendship develops, which quickly becomes more.
Yes, they form a bond. Forbidden, of course. They get caught in the stable area. Paul was just blowing Florrie a kiss. And Florrie, unlike others might have, she actually speaks up when confronted by the twins.
What does she say?
She admits it. I do like him, mistress. A simple assertion of human feeling.
And the reaction?
Immediate, calculated cruelty, mainly from Lucy, fueled by jealousy, possessiveness. Who knows exactly? She strikes Paul hard across the shoulder with her cane. And then comes the punishment, which is deeply symbolic.
What was it?
Paul is forced to kiss Charlotte's horse, Kathy.
Kiss the horse?
Yes. And Lucy delivers this crushing verdict. It's the only female you're likely to kiss while I'm alive. It's meant to put an absolute psychological wall between Paul and any human affection, specifically with Florrie, who is forced to watch this.
So this pushes things towards a confrontation or at least a clarification between Paul and Florrie.
It does. It leads to this critical scene in Paul's attic room. Florrie tries to connect with him, offer genuine intimacy, kindness, equality, affection. Just human connection.
But Paul can't respond.
He can't. The 25 years of trauma, the conditioning, it's too strong. He actually admits it to her, the terrifying truth of his situation. He says something like, being treated kindly is not what I know. It's not what I'm used to.
The kindness doesn't trigger anything for him?
No, the opposite. That incident when he was 20, it seems to have completely rewired him. He needs pain, or at least the framework of humiliation established by the mistresses, to even feel aroused. Simple, kind affection leaves him cold, unresponsive. It confirms just how successful the psychological subjugation has been.
Which must be devastating for Florrie.
It leads to her heartbreaking ultimatum. She tells him she loves him, Paul, the man underneath. But she cannot live with Slave. She demands he change, but crucially, she says he has to change for himself, not just for her.
She lays it out very clearly.
Extremely clearly. I want to spend my days with a man, not a slave. She even acknowledges his conditioning, suggesting maybe she'd have to beat him for him to be aroused, but immediately dismisses it. She says she loves him too much to participate in his pathology.
Wow. So this scene just lays bare the real cost of that A of S contract. It's not just losing your freedom on paper.
It's the destruction of your internal freedom, your ability to connect, to love, to feel like a whole person. Paul feels he has nowhere else to go, physically, but the real chains are psychological now. He's incapable of receiving the very love he wants unless it comes wrapped in humiliation.
So Florrie realizes that the deliverance of freedom, the D of F, isn't just a document. It has to be a complete mental change for him.
Exactly. And if he can't make that change, she knows he'll stay a slave inside, even if someday he walks out the manor gates a free man.
Things at Wendsley Manor take another sharp turn with Lucy's death. She was such a key part of the cruelty, and her end is violent. And quick.
Very quick and brutal. It happens outside the manor's bubble in Huxley Village. Lucy's riding Kathy, her horse, and runs into some youth throwing stones.
And she confronts them.
She does. When one of them hits Kathy, Lucy apparently flies into a rage. She seemed to care more for the horse than any human and strikes the boy hard with her riding crop.
Big mistake.
Fatal mistake. The retaliation is instant. One of them pulls a blade, stabs the horse in the neck. Then they turn on Lucy. She's overpowered, beaten, kicked, and stabbed in the stomach.
And she dies right there.
Dies right there, next to her dying horse. Which, in a grim way, fulfills a wish she'd apparently expressed to be cremated on a big pyre out near Hangman's Wood.
And Paul?
Paul, ever the dutiful servant, builds the pyre and lights it, stoically. Her death is this stark reminder of just how violent and precarious life is outside the manor's controlled environment.
And Lucy's death has a major impact on Charlotte.
It seems to break something in her. Shortly after, Charlotte collapses down by a brook. The stress, the grief, maybe the sudden weight of responsibility, it pushes her over the edge physically. She gets diagnosed with something called Piper's detachment syndrome.
PDS.
PDS. What is that exactly? The sources describe it as pretty horrific.
It sounds devastating. Basically, rogue protein molecules start pulling the person's DNA apart. Causes catastrophic chromosome damage. It's relentless degenerative.
And the prognosis. Not good. Dr. Smith gives her 6 months, maybe a year. There's no actual cure. The only treatment just arrests the disease's progress. Constant exposure to something called RB gas.
RB gas. How does that work?
It requires sealed rooms, masks.
Yeah.
It's high-tech, expensive. The canisters have to be changed daily. It's intensive care, basically.
Which suddenly makes Paul indispensable, right? He goes from being a chessboard to her primary caregiver.
Absolutely. He's the one managing the RB gas, feeding her, undressing her, wheeling her around as the muscle atrophy kicks in, especially in her dominant arm. This enforced intimacy, this dependency. It does seem to soften Charlotte somewhat.
She asks his name.
She does. Finally asks his real name. He tells her, Paul.
But,
Pero.
yeah.
She can't quite make the leap. She says something like, no, I can't call you that. Slave it's been and slave it will always be. Even facing death, she needs to maintain that hierarchy.
But Paul, seeing her decline, he gets desperate. He looks for other options.
He does. He remembers Kay, the venerable mother from the Holy Ordinance Church he'd met briefly. He contacts her, hoping for a miracle. And Kay claims she has one.
What does she offer?
An alternative cure. Electronic field treatments. She claims she cured a former Zest addict, named Fallow this way, invoking Jesus' healing power. She starts the treatments on Charlotte.
And does it work?
Astonishingly, it seems to. The sources say Charlotte's RCK levels, apparently a measure of cellular health, start going back up. Dr. Smet calls the results impossible, medically speaking.
But there's a dark side to Kay's presence, isn't there? This cure comes at a price.
A huge price. While Charlotte is seemingly recovering, Kay discovers the manor's private stash of high-quality smoky zest, and she gets hooked, fast.
And the zest transforms her.
Dramatically. The pious, venerable mother disappears. She ditches the white robes for black matte leather, shaves her head, gets this huge, vulgar green dragon tattoo all over her body. She becomes volatile, demanding, almost demonic under the influence of the zest.
And this leads to another horrific incident involving Paul.
Yes. Kay, high on zest, driven by this new power and twisted desire, confronts Paul in the laundry room. She sexually assaults him.
Forces herself on him.
Tries to. Forces him onto a large wooden table. But consistent with his trauma, Paul is unresponsive. Flaccid. He can't react to just lust or power. He needs that specific framework of cruelty.
And Kay gets frustrated.
Extremely frustrated. High on zest, enraged by his lack of response, she strikes him hard across the face.
And that works.
The sources state, chillingly, that it's only after she hits him that she achieves satisfaction. It's this horrifying confirmation of just how deep Paul's conditioning goes. It validates everything Flory feared.
And Flory sees this?
Tragically, yes. She walks in right at the end, sees the aftermath, sees Paul's reaction, presumably, to the violence. She doesn't scream, doesn't intervene. She just looks at him with what the source calls profound shame and despair, turns and flees. That moment, witnessing that, seems to be the final straw for her. It seals her decision to leave him.
Charlotte's miracle recovery doesn't last, does it?
No, it's very short-lived. She suffers a massive stroke soon after. The PDS comes roaring back. One devastating effect mentioned is she loses all color vision. The world literally turns into a black and white movie for her. She's deteriorating rapidly, can only communicate by writing.
And then Aggie visits, along with the solicitor.
Yes, the vindictive Addie comes, along with the family solicitor, Mr. Butts. His nickname was Perpetual, apparently. We don't know exactly what was said. But right after they leave, Charlotte makes her final request to Paul.
What does she write?
She scrawls on her notepad, "Let me go," and then she motions towards the RB gas cylinders. The very things keeping her alive.
Asking him to end it.
Essentially, yes, a mercy killing. And this is the ultimate test, isn't it, of Paul's obedience, his love, his complex connection to her.
Does he do it?
He does. Despite everything, despite his lifelong attachment, he follows her final order. He turns off the RB mechanism. It must have been an incredibly heavy moment.
And as she's dying.
As her breathing stops, Paul whispers that he's always loved her. And Charlotte somehow manages two final, incredibly poignant lines in her notepad. First, "Be good to my sister," meaning Lucy, already dead. Maybe a sign of her confused state. And then, the crucial words, "I'm sorry if I hurt you, and thank you."
An apology. Finally. And gratitude.
Decades too late, perhaps, but it's there. An admission of guilt, a recognition of his service. It's profound.
Okay, so 5 days later, the will reading. Who's there?
Mr. Butts, the solicitor, reads it. Kay's there, expecting something because Charlotte had apparently named her as a beneficiary after exposing Paul's diary earlier. Aggie is there, probably also expectant. Pill and Pot, the cooks, are there, and Slave Paul and Flory.
Pill and Pot get something first.
Yes, a generous bequest. They get the payment house, where wages were handled, and a guaranteed annual income of 500 credit transactions. A significant reward for their loyal wage service. Shows Charlotte valued that, too.
But then comes the main part, the big shock.
The absolute shock. Mr. Butts reads the main clause. Charlotte leaves the rest of my estate, and credit to my faithful slave. Slave who cared for me beyond all duty.
She calls him slave even in the will.
Even in the will. But she leaves him everything. Wendsley Manor, the land, the vast credit fortune. Instantly, Paul goes from being property to being a free, incredibly wealthy man.
The ultimate irony. Her final act of superiority, the power to grant freedom and wealth, is also maybe her deepest expression of affection, or at least dependence and gratitude.
It's breathtakingly complex. And in that moment of shock and confusion, Florrie just gets up and rushes out of the room. She can't process it, maybe can't reconcile this incredible gift with this psychologically damaged man she just saw assaulted.
But she does come back.
She comes back later, yes, but not to stay. She comes back to explain why she has to leave, even now that he's rich and free and clearly loves her.
And her reason goes back to something that happened just before the will reading.
Exactly. A final test in her eyes. Kay, high on zest and feeling powerful, was there with Aggie. Florrie had challenged Paul, right then, knowing freedom was imminent, to assert himself. To perform one small act of defiance against his tormentors, just dump water on Kay and Aggie. Prove he could break the chains before the paper made it official.
And he couldn't do it.
He froze.
Right.
He hesitated. Kay actually ordered him to fill her glass, and he obeyed her instead of taking Florrie's challenge. For Florrie, that was it. Incontrovertible proof.
Proof that he was still slave inside.
Yes. She tells him straight, I need a man who can make love to me without needing to be beaten and humiliated. She reiterates that he has to change for himself, not for her. Her love alone can't fix him or sustain a relationship built on that foundation.
So Paul inherits everything. He's now Paul, sir, the master of Wendsley Manor. But he's not happy, is he? The sources describe him as miserable.
Utterly miserable, it seems. He has all the external markers of freedom, wealth, property, legal status. But inside, he's still trapped. He's still wearing his old, stained slave clothes.
Really? Even with all that wealth?
Yeah. He sits alone, apparently still kissing Charlotte's photograph, grappling with why she did it, asking her picture, why did you do it, mistress? I'm not deserving. He has the material freedom, but the entire emotional structure of being a slave is still firmly in place.
But the world outside the manor keeps turning, and we see this final crushing irony involving Aggie.
Right. The wheel of fortune in this society turns brutally fast. Gossip reaches the manor. Aggie, the hard, vicious woman with the slave-pulled carriage, is flat broke, gambled everything away.
So what happens to her?
In the ultimate reversal, Aggie, the former mistress, has applied for her own A of S contract, an acceptance of slavery. She's starting at the bottom, at an agency.
Which
means, technically, legally, she could end up being assigned to Wendsley Manor, serving Paul, the man she helped humiliate. It's the perfect cruel symmetry of the system.
Wow. And Kay, does she stay addicted to zest?
No. Kay apparently pulls herself together. She quits the zest, gets the dragon tattoo removed, goes back to her pious, venerable mother look. Paul actually gives her church a large donation.
Generous.
Perhaps. Kay visits him, maybe trying to regain influence, and she makes one last attempt to manipulate him, suggesting he should take Aggie on as his personal slave, implying it would give him, emotional satisfaction given their history.
And how does Paul react to that? This seems like a key moment.
It is. And it's perhaps his first clear, unambiguous act of mastery, of asserting his new self. He rejects her suggestion instantly, flat out. No slaves here now, he retorts.
You'd already freed the others.
Yes. He tells Kay he's issued D&C's deliverance of freedom and credit to almost all the remaining house staff. He's effectively dismantled the slave system at Wendsley Manor.
So materially, morally, he's done everything right. He's used his freedom to free others.
Exactly. He has the power, the wealth, the moral high ground. But the source emphasizes he's still deeply lonely in that huge, empty house. The psychological transformation hasn't happened.
And the final image we're left with.
It's stark. Paul, sitting alone by the old chessboard, the one tattooed on his back for years. Now he just moves the pieces himself. He won the inheritance, he gained all the material freedom you could imagine, but he lost Florrie, the woman he loved, because he couldn't break free from the identity of slaves.
And he acknowledges this himself.
In a way, yeah. His final melancholy comment, looking at the board, may be thinking of Charlotte. Pawn takes queen. That's about right, Charlotte. The lowest piece takes the highest. But he's still trapped in the logic of the game, the power dynamics she established. He won the inheritance, but he's still playing her game internally.
So Wendsley Manor, it really showed us how this legal system of servitude, born from economic collapse, creates these incredibly powerful psychological bonds. Bonds that just defy logic. Paul loves the woman who owned him, needs cruelty for intimacy, and can't assert himself even when faced with losing the love of his life.
He's got everything now. Credit, power, legal freedom, Master Paul. But Florrie's gone, and her condition was that he change for himself. So without her as the motivation, what will be his impetus to change? Can someone institutionalized since they were 15, defined for decades as slave, ever truly shed that skin?
That really is the question, isn't it? For you, the listener, Paul got the D of F, the deliverance of freedom, on paper. He's rich, he's the master. But what in this dark future can actually grant him the internal freedom, the psychological deliverance he needs? Is freedom even freedom if it doesn't heal the wounds that keep you from truly living? Something to think about.